I still remember the sound my truck tires made crunching over the gravel when I pulled back into my driveway that Sunday evening. And I swear, before I even shut off the engine, something felt wrong. You ever come home, and your brain catches something before your eyes fully process it? That's exactly what happened. I was staring straight ahead at the eastern side of my property, and for a second I honestly thought I'd turned into the wrong driveway, because the tree line was gone. Just gone. I sat there with my hands still on the steering wheel while my wife Rachel was gathering bags in the passenger seat, and she looked up and went quiet too. Didn't ask a question. Didn't say anything. She just stared. Where there had been this thick wall of mature hardwoods towering red oaks, sugar maples, old-growth trees that had been standing there longer than I'd been alive, there was open sky, bright sunlight, bare dirt, and 12 tree stumps. Fresh, wide as barrels, sawdust still scattered around them. I got out of the truck so fast I nearly left the door open behind me. Walked straight toward the eastern boundary, and the closer I got, the worse it looked. Deep tire ruts in the mud. Branches tossed into piles. Huge trunks cut clean and dragged off. Whoever did it had come in with equipment. And they'd gone 40 feet into my land. That's when Rachel quietly said behind me, "Nate?" I turned, and she was pointing. One of the survey stakes. Bent sideways. Still half buried. That made my stomach drop. Because now I knew this wasn't storm damage. Wasn't confusion. Wasn't somebody trimming too far. Someone had crossed the line and knew exactly where they were. For context, my name's Nathan Mercer. I live outside Asheville, North Carolina, on 7 wooded acres my dad helped me buy back in 2014. It's peaceful out there. The kind of place where mornings start with birds and coffee and evenings end with tree frogs and crickets. And those trees on the eastern side mattered. People hear trees and think landscaping. No, these weren't decorative. They gave us privacy from the neighboring ridge. Kept the slope stable when heavy rain rolled through. Protected the property line, raised the land value, and honestly, they made the place feel like home. You could stand on our back porch and hear wind moving through those branches like ocean waves. I love that. Always did. Those trees had been on county survey records going back decades. Everybody knew where that line was. Which brings me to our new neighbors. About 2 months before all this, a couple from Georgia bought the parcel next door. Derek and Melissa Halstead. Cash purchase. Quick close. Beautiful custom SUV. Brand new hiking boots that somehow had never touched dirt. You know the type. Friendly enough at first. Big smiles. Firm handshake. Lots of talk about starting fresh. The first time Derek came over, I was checking a drainage ditch after rain. He walked up and introduced himself. "Hey neighbor." Derek Halstead. Nathan Mercer. He glanced toward the ridge and whistled. "Man, gorgeous out here." "It is." Then he pointed toward my eastern tree line. "You ever think about thinning those out? You'd have a killer mountain view." I laughed. "Nope." He smiled. Thought I was joking. "I'm serious." "I know," I said. "Still no." I told him those trees were protected and well inside my boundary. He nodded. Looked casual. Then he said, "Would have sworn the line was farther west." And I remember saying, "Survey says otherwise." He smiled again. Little tighter this time. Then walked back. At the time I figured, okay. He asked. I answered. Conversation over. Apparently not. Rachel and I had spent the next few weeks busy with work, then finally took a short beach trip with the kids. 3 nights gone. That's all. 72 hours. And somehow that was enough time for Derek to hire a crew and erase half a century. I called him standing right there beside the stumps. He answered on the second ring. Cheerful. Like nothing in the world was wrong. "Hey Nathan, did your crew cut my trees down?" Silence. Then, "Oh yeah, we meant to call." I remember blinking because he said it so casually, like he was explaining a delayed Amazon package. "You cut down 12 mature trees on my land. We thought they were ours." "No, you didn't." He exhaled like I was being difficult. "Look, man, you've actually got way better light now. Melissa loves how open it feels." I stared at the stump in front of me. Fresh cut. Rings visible. 60 years. Maybe more. Then I said, "Those trees were marked. The survey stake is still here." And Derek laughed. Actually laughed. "Nate, trees grow back." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Because it wasn't apology. Wasn't concern. Wasn't misunderstanding. It was dismissal. Like I was overreacting. Like he'd done me a favor. Then he added, "If it's really a problem, call insurance or something." Insurance. I looked out across the dirt and suddenly felt completely calm. That kind of cold calm where anger gets real focused. No, I told him. I'm gonna call somebody else. And I hung up. Rachel was standing by the porch, arms crossed, watching me. She knows me well enough to read my face. What are you doing? I pulled out my keys. I'm going to see Caleb. Caleb Warren's been my attorney 15 years. Real estate, property disputes, sharp as a blade. And he lived 20 minutes away. By the time I got to his office, the sun was dropping behind the hills. He heard me out, didn't interrupt once. Then grabbed his legal pad and stood up. Let's go. We walked the property for almost an hour. He measured from stake to stump, took photos, marked distances, called a forestry valuation guy he trusted. And right before dark, he stood there with dirt on his boots and said quietly, Nathan, this is bad for them. How bad? He looked back at the cut line. Very. Then he glanced at me. Especially if they knew exactly where that line was. I looked east, toward Derek's place. And that's when I noticed something else. Brand new deck framing, fresh lumber, concrete footings, and 2 support beams sitting suspiciously close to my side of the boundary. Closer than they had any business being. Caleb saw it too. He squinted, then gave me a look. And that's when I realized the trees weren't the whole plan. They hadn't just wanted a better view. They wanted more land. And standing there in that fading light, with sawdust still in the air and Derek's half-built deck creeping toward my property line, I knew this whole thing was about to get a whole lot uglier. The next morning, I was up before sunrise. Didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those stumps. Bright raw wood where old bark used to be, like something had been ripped open and left exposed. Rachel made coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table while the sky turned pale over the ridge. Neither of us talked much. We didn't really need to. Then Caleb called. I got the forestry appraisal started. That fast. I also pulled county parcel maps and your survey history. I heard papers shuffling. Then he said, calm as ever, Nathan, Derek's got a problem. I leaned back. How big? The cut line was 28 feet inside your boundary at the shallowest point. I just stared at the wall. And the deepest. 43. I let out a slow breath. Caleb continued. Those 12 trees alone are worth more than I expected. Timber value, replacement value, privacy loss, erosion risk. This adds up fast. How fast? Enough that I'd stop him immediately before he makes it worse. That was all I needed. I drove over there. Derek was outside with a contractor, coffee cup in hand, pointing at the deck frame like they were planning a vacation resort. He saw me and smiled, which honestly made my blood pressure spike. Nate. Morning. I ignored that. You need to stop construction. He looked confused in that fake way some people do when they know exactly what they're doing. Why? Because your crew cut into my land, and now your framing's pushing the line too. The contractor stepped back real quick. Smart man. Derek laughed. Relax. We're nowhere near your property. I pointed at the survey marker. He didn't even look. Then I said, my attorney measured it yesterday. That changed his face for half a second. Just enough. Then he recovered. Contractor already got paid. Not my problem. He shrugged. Then sue me. And man, there's something about hearing somebody say that with a smirk. Like they think legal consequences are just background noise. Like rules apply to everyone else. I looked him dead in the eye. Okay. Then I turned around and left. No yelling. No threats. Nothing. That seemed to bother him more. By that afternoon, Caleb had a formal demand letter drafted. Detailed. Precise. Every tree listed. Measurements. Photos. Estimated damages. Trespass. Property destruction. Notice to cease construction immediately. And removal of encroaching materials pending inspection. Delivered certified mail. Email copy. And courier. No excuses. 3 days later, Derek responded through an attorney in Atlanta, which somehow made perfect sense. The letter was one of those polished legal documents that sounds professional while saying absolutely ridiculous things. Their position was basically they believed the tree line appeared to be theirs. Their landscaping crew acted in good faith. No intentional harm occurred. And in the spirit of neighborly resolution, they offered me $1,500. $1,500. Rachel read the number and laughed. Not happy laughter. The kind where you laugh because the alternative is throwing something. Caleb didn't laugh. He folded the letter and said, we file. And we did. Timber trespass. Property damage. Encroachment. Injunction. Everything. Once paperwork hit county records, things changed. Quick. A deputy came out for documentation. Forestry assessor walked the site. County zoning reviewed the deck. Surveyors restaked every corner. Bright orange ribbons everywhere. By then neighbors were noticing. That kind of thing spreads fast in mountain communities, especially when heavy equipment rolls in and sheriff's vehicles show up. A couple days later I was checking the mailbox when Melissa came marching across the grass. Arms swinging. Big sunglasses. Expensive workout clothes. Already irritated. Seriously, she snapped. I turned. Can I help you? You involve the county? Yes. Over trees. I stared at her. Over 12 mature hardwoods on my land. She folded her arms. We paid a fortune for this property. Okay. And now you're creating drama. I almost smiled. I'm not the one who hired chainsaws while my family was out of town. Her face tightened. Then she pointed toward the ridge. We bought this place for the view. There it was. Finally. Plain and simple. I nodded slowly. And you thought my property was part of the package? She stepped closer. No. We thought neighbors could be reasonable. That one actually made me laugh. And I said, reasonable would have been knocking on my door. She spun around and stormed back. Didn't love that answer. A week later Derek ignored the stop notice and kept building. That surprised even Caleb. Because at that point he'd been formally warned by county and legal counsel. And still, workers showed up. More lumber. More framing. One beam went directly over flagged boundary markers. Caleb saw the photos and literally shook his head. He's either arrogant or panicking. Maybe both. Probably both. Then county issued a temporary halt. Derek appealed. Lost. Kept going anyway. And that was when the sheriff got involved. Deputy Mason was a local guy. Steady voice. Been around forever. He walked the property with survey papers in hand and talked to Derek for maybe 10 minutes. I couldn't hear all of it. But I did hear Derek say, "This is ridiculous." And Mason replied, "Sir, the line is the line." Simple as that. Work stopped for a few days. Then court came. I'd been in court before. Never for something this personal. Because money's one thing. But land feels different. Especially when you spent years maintaining it. Watching seasons move through it. Raising kids on it. Judge Eleanor Whitaker walked in right on time. Late 60s. Sharp eyes. Former professor before becoming a judge. Didn't waste words. Caleb laid everything out. Survey history. Timber valuation. Photos before and after. Drone footage. County records. Then Derek's attorney tried arguing confusion. Said the property line was visually ambiguous. Which honestly was bold considering we had decades of surveys and orange stakes all over the place. Judge Whitaker asked one question. Mr. Halstead, did you discuss those trees with Mr. Mercer before cutting them? Derek hesitated. Then yes. Did he indicate they were his? Another pause. Yes. Then why did you proceed? Silence. His attorney stepped in. Judge stopped him. No. I asked Mr. Halstead. Derek shifted in his chair. Finally said, we believed he was mistaken. Judge Whitaker looked at him over her glasses. About his own survey? That silence in the room. You could feel it. Caleb handed over appraisal reports. Judge reviewed everything quietly. Then she looked at Derek. After being notified, you continued construction? Yes. Across flagged boundary markers? He swallowed. Our contractor advised. I didn't ask what your contractor advised. That landed hard. Then she looked at me. Mr. Mercer, how long had those trees been standing? Longer than I've owned the property. Probably 60 years or more. And did they provide screening between parcels? Yes, ma'am. She nodded. Wrote something down. Then recessed. 15 minutes. Felt like an hour. Rachel squeezed my hand. Caleb leaned toward me and whispered, he's in trouble. Judge came back. Everybody stood. Then she delivered it. Clear. Direct. The defendants knowingly entered plaintiff's property. Removed protected mature hardwoods without permission. Ignored boundary notice. Continued encroaching construction after warning. Damages awarded under timber trespass statute. Triple value. Property impact. Legal fees. An immediate mandatory removal of all encroaching structures within 30 days. Derek actually blinked. Like maybe he thought he misheard. Then came the number. $31,400. Plus removal. Plus additional fees pending enforcement. Melissa whispered something sharp under her breath. Derek looked pale. I thought that was the end. Honestly, I did. But then Caleb touched my sleeve and quietly said, Not done yet. I followed his eyes toward the clerk, who was handing Judge Whitaker one additional report. County enforcement filed that morning regarding continued unauthorized construction after posted legal notice. Judge scanned it, looked up, and Derek's face changed immediately, because suddenly this wasn't just civil damages anymore. And the next words out of her mouth made the entire room go dead quiet. Judge Whitaker lowered the paperwork, looked directly at Derek, and for the first time that entire morning her voice had real edge to it. Mr. Halstead, were you aware this stop work notice was posted before construction resumed? Derek shifted in his chair. His attorney leaned toward him. Too late. Deputy Mason was already standing. He stepped forward with the county report and said, calm as ever, yes, Your Honor. I personally delivered notice on site and confirmed receipt. And that was the moment Derek's whole expression changed. Not irritated. Not defensive. Actually nervous. The kind of nervous where somebody suddenly realizes this thing they treated like a game has become very real. Judge Whitaker nodded slowly. Then she said, the court takes trespass seriously. The court takes willful violation of county orders even more seriously. You could hear papers moving. A cough in the back. Nobody else said a word. Then she added, I'm referring this matter for review regarding criminal trespass and code enforcement violations. Melissa looked at Derek so fast I thought she might actually say something right there. He stared straight ahead. Deputy Mason stepped beside their row. No handcuffs. Not then. But the message landed hard enough. The hearing ended. People filed out. Caleb packed his folder like it was just another Tuesday. Rachel finally exhaled. And I stood there trying to process the fact that 3 months earlier all I'd wanted was to keep my tree line intact and live quietly in the woods. Now county inspectors were involved, court orders were signed, and Derek Halstead looked like somebody had kicked the legs out from under him. Outside the courthouse, he tried stopping me. Nathan. I kept walking. He followed. This got out of hand. That actually made me laugh. I turned. Out of hand. He spread his arms. We made a mistake. No, I said. You made a decision. He glanced toward Melissa, then back at me. Can't we settle this? We tried. His jaw tightened. You're really gonna do this over trees? That sentence. Even then, even after court, still didn't get it. I stepped closer. Quiet. Calm. Derek, this was never just trees. He frowned. It was my property. It was my family's privacy. It was you hearing no and deciding no didn't apply to you. He looked away, and for the first time since he moved in, he had nothing to say. 30 days later, county came to inspect. I watched from my porch with coffee while contractors dismantled the deck Derek had been so determined to build. Boards stacked, rail framing removed, concrete anchors cut loose. One beam had crossed onto my property by nearly 4 feet. Gone by noon. There was something strangely satisfying about watching somebody undo the exact thing they swore they'd never touch. Melissa stayed inside. Blinds shut. Didn't come out once. Derek stood there most of the morning with his hands on his hips, pretending to supervise. But every now and then he'd glance toward my side. And every single time, I'd still be sitting there, coffee in hand, watching. No smile. Didn't need one. Then came the county review. Additional penalties. Failure to comply. Unauthorized excavation. Permit issues. That bill stacked fast. By then word had spread through the ridge. Neighbors talked. Folks at the hardware store talked. Even the woman at the post office asked Rachel one morning, so, are they really tearing the whole thing down? Small town life. Nothing stays quiet long. About 6 months later, Derek appealed. Lost. The appellate judge didn't dance around it. Called it willful disregard for established property rights. Added attorney fees. More costs. Caleb called me that afternoon and said, congratulations, they officially ran out of road. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. And that should have been the ending. But it wasn't. Because late that fall a for sale sign went up next door. Fast. No landscaping. No fancy photo shoots. Just listed. Then reduced. Then reduced again. By winter they sold. Below what they paid. Truck loaded. SUV packed. Melissa didn't wave. Derek did. Brief. Awkward. Half apology. Half resentment. I nodded back. That was enough. And then they were gone. The ridge got quiet again. Really quiet. Spring rolled in a few months later. The land looked different. Still more open than before. Still strange. But we started planting. Young red oaks. Sugar maples. A few native dogwoods Rachel wanted near the slope. Our son helped dig. Our daughter carried mulch buckets bigger than she was. It took all weekend. At sunset on the last day, Rachel stood beside me looking out over the fresh line of saplings. And she smiled. They'll be beautiful someday. I nodded. Yeah. Then she leaned against my shoulder and said something I still think about. Funny, they wanted a better view so badly they never realized they were the ones who had to leave. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. The woods eventually got their rhythm back. Birds returned. Shade slowly came in. The ridge feels like ours again. Different than before, but peaceful. And every now and then I walk that eastern boundary and pass the new trees growing where those old giants once stood. And I think about how weird neighbor disputes can get. Because sometimes it starts with one conversation. One person hearing a boundary and deciding boundaries are flexible. One person thinking money or confidence or pressure can bend somebody else into stepping aside. And sometimes they're right. People do back down. People avoid conflict. People let things slide. But sometimes, they pick the wrong property and the wrong neighbor. And they end up spending tens of thousands of dollars chasing a mountain view they never get. I still think Derek believed I'd eventually give in. Maybe split the difference. Maybe get tired. Maybe decide it wasn't worth the fight. And I think that's the part he never understood. It was always worth fighting. Because if somebody can walk onto your land while you're gone, cut down something that took 60 years to grow, then shrug and call it a favor, what exactly are they going to respect next? That's the part one still wonder about. And I'm curious what you think. If your neighbor cut down trees on your property while you were out of town, and then kept building like nothing happened, would you have handled it the same way? Or would you have done something different? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoy real stories about land disputes, neighbors pushing too far, and people learning boundaries the hard way, hit like, subscribe, and stick around, because trust me, this wasn't even the wildest property line story I've ever seen.